Hello, welcome to episode 20 of the Daily Disney Podcast. I thank you so much for joining me. Today we're going to talk about 3 rides that I wish were still around at Walt Disney World. A lot of people do this quite frequently, and it's something that I've thought about for a bit. And these are 3 rides that, although I was a younger guy, a kid, when I visited when these rides were at the parks, they still kind of left an impression on me because I still not only remember these rides, but constantly feel like I'm going back and watching the videos about them and what happened with them and different things like that. So, without further ado, let's get right into the 3 rides that I still wish were at Walt Disney World. Okay, so the 3rd ride that I wish was still at the Magic Kingdom, you can still ride this over at Disneyland in California, but it's Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. It was a little bit of kind of insanity there. It had 2 different tracks, and it was one of those kind of dark rides where you're in a little car, there's 4 people, and it kind of just spun you around and jerked you around, and by the end of it, you're like, what the heck was going on? But basically, this ride was an opening day attraction in 1971. It was modeled after the Disneyland attraction, reused the same soundtrack and various sound effects. It had a few things that set it apart. The Florida ride had two separate boarding areas. When you're walking through the queue, you can either go left or right. And then that kind of dictated if you were on the left track or the right track. The rides were called jalopies, which are an old school kind of car from back in the day. They followed different paths, and you got a slightly different ride depending on the side. So your goal for the vacation was to hit both sides, just so you saw both of them, right? It's not a thrill ride, but it was not a slow and quiet ride like most dark rides. There were sudden turns. You'd go full speed towards an obstacle, and then you move out of the way at the end. The vehicles on different tracks would head directly towards each other, almost feeling like you're going to run into each other. It was very, very, very clever. It was one of those really kind of cool rides. In October of 1997, rumors began to spread that the attraction based on Winnie the Pooh would be coming to the Magic Kingdom and taking the spot of Mr. Toad. On August 27th, 1998, Walt Disney announced the closure of Mr. Toad, and the reactions were very, very negative. This is early stages of the internet, but there were many, many different websites created. Many different groups were there kind of having sit-ins, not leaving until they had their voice heard. There were different postcards, there were different t-shirts, all kinds of different things. But to no avail, it closed on September 7th, 1998 to make way for the many adventures of Winnie the Pooh. So there are a few tributes in Pooh that you can see for Mr. Toad. There is at the very beginning of the ride, the Mr. Toad is handing over the deed of the ride, basically, to, I think it's Owl that's taking that. And then also in the Haunted Mansion, they've got a kind of a pet cemetery type thing, and Mr. Toad is there as well. But ultimately, I thought that this was a really cool, fun ride. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was unique. The Winnie the Pooh ride's fine. It's fine. Mr. Toad was one of those that was really, really cool. It was based on The Wind in the Willows. Everybody read that book growing up. It's a shame that this ride is not there anymore because it was so unique. It is still in Disneyland, so you can still go see it. But it's very controversial. It's got different things. You're driving through hell at one point. You're going to get hit by a train at one point. Actually, you do get hit by the train. Excuse me. So there's just different things like that. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun ride, and I miss it. I miss it in Orlando. I do. All right, the number 2 ride that I wish was still at Disney World is in Epcot, World of Motion. Now, this was the slowest of the slowest rides. Sometimes you think this was kind of boring, but I liked it because you sat in a vehicle, you came around a swooping, it's a slow moving dark ride. You came around a swooping curve, and then there's an opening in the ride that you could look directly down Epcot, see Spaceship Earth, see some of the countries. It was an amazing, amazing view for 10 to 15 seconds. It's a 6-person Omnimover vehicle. It basically takes you across all of the different modes of transportation. It was open in 82, closed in 96. It closed in 96 and opened up for Test Track. Test Track is a fantastic ride. I think it probably is my favorite ride on Disney property. So I really liked it. I thought it was cool. There were a bunch of different audio animatronics. There were a bunch of different features. They had a Pepper's Ghost illusion, putting ghosts in futuristic vehicles. That was pretty cool. At the end of the ride, you could get into a trans center, which was all about what was being developed at General Motors, which was the sponsor of the ride. The ride closed in 1996. GM continued with its sponsorship for Test Track, and it opened in 1999. Excuse me. The GM sponsorship then moved over to Chevrolet, but World of Motion I thought was one that was really, really cool. The premise of the ride was to be a funny look into the history of transportation from the ancient days of foot power through time into the future. General Motors signed a 10-year sponsorship deal. So they wanted to sponsor this to compete with Ford that was basically with the New York's World Fair. The pavilion constructed was part of the initial construction during Epcot's initial launch. The attraction was ready for grand opening with the park October 1st, 1982. It was part of the opening cast. The pavilion was given a specific opening ceremony with GM executives a few days later. Basically the ride itself, it was a 15-minute ride. You had 4 to 6 riders per vehicle. They had a really cool, clever song, It's Fun to Be Free. If you have never seen this, go take a 15-minute look on YouTube about it. It's really, really cool, really, really clever. Yes, it got boring at times. There were a few parts where you're like, okay, don't need to talk about the wheel anymore. But it was really, really funny. It was just one of those things that I enjoyed. Air conditioning, nice, cool, slow ride. I miss it. I think it's cool. I wish there was a spot for it with Test Track, but I understand why it's not there, but it is one of those that I do miss. I thought it was cool and I thought it was fun. And then number 1, you could probably guess, I'm a big fan of Epcot, especially retro Epcot. So, Horizons. Horizons, I think, is the best ride ever created. It had its flaws. It did. Luckily, there were a bunch of people that did a bunch of video for Horizons as the rumors came out that it was going to close. Even some folks that did some illegal stuff by jumping off the ride and doing some behind-the-scenes footage that you should not do, but it's out there. Horizons was a dark ride attraction at Epcot. It was in Future World, as we know. It was basically the sequel to Carousel Progress. So Horizons is the only attraction in Future World to showcase all of Epcot's Future World elements: communication, community interaction, energy, transportation, autonomy, physiology, and humankind relationship with the sea, land, air, and space. There's a lot going on. The attraction opened on October 1st, 1983 as part of Phase 2 of Epcot. It closed in December of 1994 for more than a year after General Electric ended its sponsorship. Horizons reopened December 24th, 1995 due to closure of 2 other attractions. Universe of Energy and World of Motion were closed. Excuse me. So for people who actually have something to do, they reopened it. What's insane is this sat closed for a year. From December 94 to December 95, it just sat there. So that's really crazy, isn't it? But it opened again in 95, and then it permanently closed in January of 99. It was dismantled to make room for Mission Space, a thrill ride that opened in 1993. I hate Mission Space. I think it's stupid. I think it's dumb. I think it's just a weak, a weak attempt to make you think you're flying through space. I get that same feeling with the VR set, and probably the same type of look and feel at my local mall with what they have there in a couple of the different gaming areas. So we'll get to that at a different time. But there were so many great songs throughout the ride. There are 184 vehicles, 3 or 4 riders per vehicle. It was a 14 minute, 45 minute ride. The ride vehicle just hung down from the ceiling. And if you're listening, not watching, it hung down, and then you kind of sat right here on the front where my knuckles were. So it's very similar to almost like what the Nemo ride is, but the Nemo is on the ground, but everything was facing out. It wasn't facing forward. So that's number one. That's how unique it was. And then number two, it had so many cool, clever parts where it teased the future. It teased, here's what we could be doing in space. Here's what we're doing with growing agriculture. But it kind of put that funny spin on it. So I think it is the best ride out there. At the end, of course, everybody knows. You get to pick your own adventure, basically. You get to pick if you're going to end over lease, land, sea, or air, going through space. Just different things like that. But one thing that I think is interesting is it has such a huge following. It still does. And everything changed as this ride was going in development. Basically, at the end of the day, when GE announced they were not going to renew the sponsorship, that pretty much put the nail in the coffin that this was going to be hurting. And then from there, Disney released that it was on a sinkhole. Is that true? Who knows? The lack of corporate sponsorship, who knows if that really was the problem. There was also, the sinkhole and the structural problems were really out there. The roof was caving in, they said. I don't know. It's very, very interesting, right? I find it interesting that it sat there for a full year without being touched. That is crazy to me. But anyway, my ride that I think should be here is Horizon. It's got the best logo. I love the music. I think it was fun. I think it was cool. I think it was clever. I know we can never bring it back, but it'd be cool if something like that could return, for sure. So that's going to do it for us here on episode 20. I wish Mr. Toad, World of Motion, and Horizons were still in the Disney parks. Mr. Toad will never come back because it was here. It's still in California. There's so much controversy around it with the different things. But it was fun. It was a different type of dark ride. It was a different type of kind of not thrill ride, but not just kind of boring sit there type ride. It was really cool. World of Motion will never come back. I know. It was a slow moving ride. We've got other things to tell us about the transportation, but it was really, really neat, cool at the time. And then Horizons speaks for itself, cool at the time, very innovative, very fun, very clever. That's one that I wish it would. I just don't know. I don't know. You can find a spot for anything, right? The property is huge, but it'd be really cool if they somehow could rebuild that and get it kind of close to what it was. But anyway, those are 3 that I wish would come back. And they still live on YouTube. You just look up any of those 3 rides. You can definitely see a point of view ride, different things like that. So you can actually still follow along and ride those. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me. We're 20 episodes in, so thank you for your support. Please like and subscribe on your favorite podcast channel. We are on the YouTube as well. It's The Daily Craig. That's our channel. And then we have a Daily Disney Podcast playlist for everything. And then we're also on the Twitterverse at Daily Disney Pod. So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for following along. And we will talk to you soon.